Welcome to Podula Rasa. I'm David Blank.
And I'm Jim Esch.
This is a podcast about finding something in nothing. Welcome to Podula Rasa. This is Dave. Early on in the podcast, we focused rather intently on the impact of one very special man in a lot of our lives, Tom Williams. It's very hard to believe he's been gone for 13 years. Yet his legacy lives on in so many of his students. Perhaps that's the mark of an excellent teacher or mentor or friend. Perhaps it's a measure of a life well lived. We all stand to learn something from recognizing and reflecting on people like this. They matter to us, perhaps because they make us understand what it is to be a good human being. On today's show, we will be touching on a man behind the man. Professor Frank Ford was a professor of creative writing at Westchester University and an influential mentor of Tom's early on. This past March, he passed away at the age of 90. My podcasting partner in this show, Jim Esch, also had Frank as a teacher later in his career. In fact, Frank retired from teaching the year Jim graduated. It's my honor today to interview Jim about Professor Ford. Hey, Jim.
Hey, Dave.
I've been enjoying learning about this person I didn't know and seeing some of the similarities between he and Tom Williams, or at least the person I remember. I'm really happy to be able to talk with you about him and learn some more. And
yeah, I'm thrilled to have the opportunity to share with people a little bit about who Frank was, what made him so special. I wish you all had gotten to know him. He was a really cool guy.
Well, what do you remember about Frank from your college days?
A lot. So I think I had him my freshman first semester, because I came in as an English major and my primary interest was creative writing. So it was an intro to creative writing class. And I remember sitting in the classroom on opening day, and this man had come in and he was sort of overweight and very sort of quiet, but with this wry grin. And he would just quietly lead the class, and I didn't completely know what to expect, but I quickly caught on that this guy, even though I don't understand always what I'm seeing and hearing from him, I'm listening and absorbing, and he just was different. Like, he just seemed very unique and coming at things from an angle, and I think I immediately was attracted to that. That's sort of my earliest memory of him, is like thinking like, this guy's a strange bird, but I like him.
But you had also heard about him from Tom, right?
Yes. So there was a history here. So you all know, people in the audience, that we both had Tom in creative writing in high school. And when I told Tom Williams that I was going to Westchester, he said, "Oh," he's like, "look out for Frank Ford," and then he said something to the effect of, "don't let him change it too much," or something like that. And I don't remember the exact words, but it was, the idea was, look out, you're going to have an experience with this guy. And I didn't know quite how to take it. Like, I didn't sort of probe it. I just sort of made me worried. And I thought, oh, geez, what am I in for? Is this guy going to be some kind of intimidating, because I've had creative writing teachers like that. I could talk about grad school, but we'll save that for another show. I just didn't know whether I should trust this teacher or, so I came in very wary. Then I realized, I don't know what Tom was talking about, but this guy's fine. He's just sort of hard to read sometimes, but he was very nurturing. He and his colleague, Teddy West, who's still with us, so she's in her 90s too. They were office mates and they were quite a team, but they were just so supportive of the creative writing students. And I thank them forever for that. Yeah, it was weird because I kind of had this, his reputation preceded him, but then it wasn't what I expected.
Okay. I've heard he's known as Uncle Frank. Can you tell me about that?
Yeah, a lot of people called him Uncle Frank. He was avuncular. He acted like your uncle. He wasn't a father figure at all, to me at least, but he was very much like an uncle. He was he would put you at ease. He would, if you asked for advice, he would sort of give it, and he was a great listener. come to his office. I'd come to his office to go over like a manuscript or something, but most of the time we just chatted about things. And I know Stacy, my wife, who was also a English major at Westchester and had Frank, she was going through some things in her life, and he provided her some really good support. So he was uncle like in that way.
I think as teachers, we get into that role of almost like a personal advisor, perhaps almost too often, but and especially like in my life online, it happens a lot. Because you hear so many stories of what people are going through. And, it's up to us to make that difference for them. It's as much about caring as it is about teaching.
I don't know if Tom Williams was that way too. I suspect, based on some of the interviews we had, that he was that way to some students. Like they went to him seeking support and advice.
Yeah. Oh, I think so. I mean, I think, well, when you're in high school, everybody's a little bit lost anyway. The one thing I remember about Tom, though, is that I don't know if he was as supportive as he was encouraging. And maybe there's not a difference, but to me, he would push me to do more of whatever I was doing. Like, just go ahead, just go for it. What have you got to lose, kind of thing.
Yeah. And I think Frank was that way too.
Yeah. I've heard about Freudian slips.
Yeah. So the background of this was I was the editor of our college literary magazine my senior year, and the advisor for that was Teddy West. But it was also the year that Frank was retiring. He was going through early retirement. So on the sly, we planned to do this tribute to him in the literary magazine, which we called Freudian Slips, a seminar for writers who like to talk about writing but don't like to write. And one of my friends, Sean Solden, who was a really good photographer, she sort of snuck in and pretended to be taking his photo for the yearbook, but it was going to be in a literary magazine. So we got this great photo of him sitting at his desk, and he always had his feet up, and a very well-worn chair. And we all started gathering these sayings that he would come out with during class. So we just compiled those into this little 2-page thing called Freudian Slips. I could read some of these for you. Maybe you can react to them.
Sure.
And some of these lines, some of them I still think of to this day. So the first one, will this semester never end? He used to say that on the first day of class. Like that. That was a Teddy story. Like he would walk into the office and say, will this semester never end? I always think of that the first day of the semester.
That's brilliant.
You can't say life is boring.
Can't say life is boring.
Especially if you're a writer.
Well, it certainly makes you think.
Yeah.
It challenges you to go, all right, come on. Tell me what's boring about it.
Right. This is a favorite of mine too. Space, idea, form, graphics. The white or open space is as important as the dark. To draw a tree, draw everything but the tree. What's left is the tree.
That's interesting.
That sounds almost like, like Buddhist or Taoist or something, It's sort of got that Eastern philosophy feel to
it. Yeah, Lao Tzu could have written that.
Right.
I mean, it's definitely a poem.
Show, don't tell. That's one we all say in creative writing classes, and he was, I guess, the first one who exposed me to that. Maybe Tom used that one too. I can't remember.
Well, it's a good direction for a writer. I mean, I'm not really a writer, but
this line was in response to when students would ask him, well, how long is this story supposed to be? And he would say, you're required to write as much as you wish.
I'm going to have to remember that one because I get that all the time. And I encourage students to be brief because I have to read it.
This is one that I think of all the time, too. How Frank grades papers. I throw them all up in the air, and whatever sticks to the ceiling gets an A. And, he had a very messy desk. So then he would say things like, I know where everything is on this desk.
Right. Right. I think, didn't you send me a picture?
Yes, that was a picture that was in the literary magazine. It probably has stacks of papers on it.
My research mentor in graduate school had a similar desk. He would have piles and piles of papers. And the thing was, you'd go in and have a meeting with him once every other week or something. And he'd say, we'd be talking about the chemistry reactions. And it was literally like a tell of papers, like civilization upon civilization had built upon things. And it's just where they ended up at when he was done reading them. And he would say, oh, well, have you thought about doing it this way? And he would describe the chemistry. And then he would reach down at the bottom of the pile and pull out the paper that he was looking for.
It's like a card trick.
And he would do that consistently. It was amazing. So I understand. Are any of his writings available online?
Yes, he had two sons, Greg and Paul, and I'm good friends with Paul. And Paul promised Frank that he would archive all of his writings, which gave great pleasure to him at the end of his life. And so Paul, about a month after he passed, Paul emailed me and said, I've added everything to the Internet Archive. So there's over 7,000 texts on there, poems, plays, stories, letters,
Wow.
all kinds of stuff. We'll share a link in the show description if you'd like to explore.
Yes, that's fantastic.
I actually published 3 books of Frank's. So after he retired, I thought that's sort of going to be the end of it with him. Well, it turns out that he got divorced and went to Florida, or he went to Florida and got divorced. I'm not sure which came first. And I heard that through the rumor mill. This was when I came back from grad school. And then he came back to Pennsylvania. I don't know how long he was down in Florida, maybe a couple years. And then he came back, and Stacy and I had a little 1-bedroom apartment in Media, and we were just sort of walking in town in Media, and I hear this guy hail us, and it's Frank Ford. And he had lost probably over 100 pounds. So he was like very thin, but boy, it was Frank. And he's like, oh, I'm living like right down the block here. It's like, so he was like 2 or 3 blocks away from where we lived.
Wow.
Through most of my 20s, we spent a lot of time with Frank. Like he would stop by that apartment. We would go out for drinks. Like we would go to the park. We would get our dollar hoagies at Tiny T's. I got to know him much better during my 20s than I knew him in college.
What a gift.
Yeah, what a gift. It was great. And then he knew I was into publishing, and I was a tech writer at Commodore, and I was doing all kinds of stuff with that. And I was learning how to make books because we were responsible for making the manuals. So he's like, well, I have these manuscripts. Do you want to publish them? Like sort of small press. And I did. And so one was a book of poems called Connecting Light, and the other was stories called Who Cares? And the third one was called The Singing Wire and Other Stories, some more fiction. And they're all available on that archive.org site. Like you can get the PDFs. So yeah, it was a lot of fun to be able to publish his work.
Wow. So you've maintained a fairly constant relationship with him throughout the rest of his life then?
Not exactly. It was during our 20s, and then at some point he bought into an artist co-op in Germantown. So he basically had this studio space. It was like an old factory that had been rehabbed into a condo, but it was for artists. And we visited him there a couple times. It was really sort of interesting, cool space. So he was in this artist co-op in Germantown for, I don't know how many years. And then after that, he moved to Florida, and he lived in Cocoa Beach. And at that point, we basically were in less touch with him. Email, yes, sometimes phone calls. And we moved to St. Louis. So we lived out in St. Louis for about 4 years, but he came to visit us in St. Louis.
No kidding.
Yeah, he flew out and he stayed in our place, and we had a lot of really happy memories of that visit. So we were pretty close. It was good. But then after that, when we moved back east and we were raising our daughter, like saw him less and less, and like it was just sort of like faded out, but not in any kind of like, intentional way. He was doing his thing. And when you're separated from someone by distance, like you don't stay in as close touch.
Right.
So I'd say like the last 20 years, it was much more infrequent.
So I'd like to get your thoughts, if you can, on the essence of what draws us to people. As many of us felt drawn towards Tom, you clearly felt drawn towards Frank as well. And obviously Tom probably was drawn towards Frank, although I don't know that we really know anything other than, what Tom said to you before you went to Westchester. But he had a relationship somehow, so there was something there.
Yeah.
And I guess I wonder if if there was in some way like an essence transmitted from Frank through Tom to you, to anybody, like what is that connection that, I don't know if it's just attraction towards people who are like-minded or what, but I'm curious about your thoughts with this particular set of people in your life.
Yeah, that's a tough one. I mean, I don't know how to describe the connection, but I can affirm that there is a connection. There's like a thread. There's a thread that goes from Frank through Tom Williams, because Tom had him in college at Westchester. We know that. And I don't know much about their connection at all. Like, I don't know if they even liked each other. I really don't know. I would just love to talk to Tom about that. Like, I just want to know more about it. And I did ask Frank once in college if he remembered Tom, because I said something like, I was sitting in his office and I said, I had this creative writing teacher in college who had you. Do you remember him? And my memory of the conversation is pretty dim, but he said something to the effect of like, he sort of remembered him. And he knew that Tom's father was a teacher at Westchester, was a professor. I think he was a psychology professor. So he remembered that connection, but he didn't have anything more firm than that. So it was like, he's just like, yeah, I remember him. But I didn't have much to go on.
Interesting.
Yeah. But the connection was there because like when I told Tom that I was going to Westchester, so he knew Frank. He sort of warned me about Frank. So that's clearly some impression had been made there, or there was some connection there. And then like the link from Frank to me, I think just he, like Tom, I think they both fostered not only creativity, but individuality. Like they just wanted you to be yourself. They wanted you to like not be really conforming or not worrying about what people think. And if you read any of his writings, you can tell this is a guy who did not care one whit for what anybody thought of his writing. He just went ahead and did it, and did a lot of it. But it was, I think he just sort of taught you to sort of find your own path. So I think that's like the connecting thread for me from Tom through Frank to myself.
Yeah. I mean, maybe it doesn't matter what Frank and Tom's relationship was, because Tom served as a conduit to make you the writer that you are today, or to help you to become the writer you are today.
Right. Yeah. All I know is he and Teddy West, the other creative writing professor at Westchester, they both were quietly supportive of what I was doing. They let you be yourself, which is not what I could say about grad school. That's another story.
Right.
It was a much more unpleasant experience. But from
Yeah.
high school and undergrad there was a real continuity there where I just felt very supported and enabled to do like what I like to do. The other thing I thought about Tom is, didn't he go to grad school for playwriting or drama, like at Villanova? He got like an MA or something in theater.
I think so. Yeah.
And I know Frank was a playwright in addition to doing poetry and short fiction. And I'm wondering if Frank maybe influenced Tom's interest in playwriting, but we'll probably never know.
Yeah. Well, if anybody's out there who knows about this, please let us know because it would be interesting to know. Do you feel like there was a connection between your style and maybe Tom's style and Frank's style? Like, is there a is there a development through that?
I don't know, because like I feel like when I had Tom as a teacher, I didn't really know his writing. I don't think I had read much of anything he wrote, and it's the same for Frank. So I can't say that they influenced my writing. All I'm influenced by is their teaching. And maybe that's the best thing you can say about a teacher,
Yeah,
right? Don't imitate me. Just,
right.
here's some guidelines, here's some advice, but like do your own thing.
Think outside the box without throwing the box away. Right. Wow.
Exactly.
Well, he certainly sounds like an amazing person.
Yeah, he really was unique.
Well, he certainly sounds like somebody who was definitely living his life.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. I think of him all the time. And the thing is, I mean, he was 90, he lived to a rich old age. I hope I get to 90.
yeah,
I'll be lucky if I do. But when I heard that news, I was really sad. Like I was very emotional. It's kind of much more than I thought I would be, because it
yeah,
wasn't a surprise that he passed away. I knew he was declining, but it really struck me. I was like, that whole week, I was like very teary and just thinking, I think because I was so wrapped up with my own life, he was really woven into the fabric of our lives. And then when that's over, like you really sense that loss.
well, if you didn't have something, you wouldn't be able to lose it.
Right.
So that's
In a lot of ways, I wish I'd had the time I had with Frank with Tom Williams,
yeah,
you
yeah,
know, like, because I really did get a lot of time with Frank post college for about 10 or 15 years, but that was just maybe starting up with Tom, like, but then he passed.
yeah. I had that experience too. I had reconnected with Tom over email, and he said, and we were, emailing back and forth, and in one of his emails he said, "Let's grab life by the wing wang and be friends." And that was my opportunity, but I had a young kid and a job and blah blah, and then it was gone. In a way, it's like I don't. Tommy, what did he used to say that he would fake right and turn left to exit a situation? Was that which is I think what he did with Zeus and the Druids when he was supposed to play with us? He just left. But in a way, I think that the lives of people who interact with you, that you're lucky when you have them there, and then they fake right and turn left. And I guess maybe we all do.
Well, here's a Frank Fordism from an old Eastern proverb, which he probably made up: tell the truth and run.
Okay. On that note, I think we should end the podcast. Jim, I really want to thank you for sharing your thoughts and remembrances of this truly incredible man who is in some way connected to us.
Yeah, he really shaped like a whole generation of students who went to Westchester. He lives on through all of us. Like that's, I think, the best you can say about somebody.
Absolutely. I guess that's what we can hope to do for others.
Yep, we can only hope.
I hope that everybody has enjoyed our podcast. If you have any comments, please feel free to write to us. And
PadularRasa@gmail.com.
that's the place. And tell us your thoughts. So thank you for your time.
Thanks, Dave. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Jim.